Hey guys, today I'm creating these cute copper wire teardrop shaped earrings with a free hanging inner circle and blue Imperial Jasper beads. So come hang out with me as I show you how to make these cute earrings. The materials we're going to need for this project are as follows. We're going to need 2 pieces of 18 gauge wire cut at 15 centimeters in length, 2 pieces of 18 gauge wire cut at 10 centimeters in length. We're going to need 2 pieces of 20 gauge wire cut at 4.5 centimeters in length. These are for your ear wires. We're also going to need some 24 gauge wire, 2 pieces, cut at 7 centimeters in length. You're also going to need some 6 millimeter blue Imperial Jasper beads, or whichever type of beads you'd like to use in your earrings. I'm also going to use this chasing hammer to flatten my wire with, this bench block to flatten my wire on, a ring mandrel that helps to know which size to make your earrings at, but you can use anything for a mandrel, round nose pliers, a pair of chain nose pliers, a pair of flush cutters, and that concludes the list. If you'd like to see this list in more detail, just check out my description below for the materials that I've used in this video. So to get started, we need to grab our 2 pieces of 18 gauge wire that were cut at 10 centimeters. And we are going to wrap these wires around the size 9 on the ring mandrel. So centering the wire on the back of the mandrel, I'm going to pull that wire up and around right at about the size 9 mark, using my thumbs to hold it in place in the back. And then I'm going to push this wire down against my mandrel, taking one side of the wires and just pressing that right up against the mandrel while leaving the other side a little tail that sticks out on the side like that. So here I've got 2 that I've wrapped at the same time, and now we're going to invert the 2 so that way we have a mirror image of the earrings. So now we're going to start by grabbing our round nose pliers, and we are going to make a loop with the shorter end, or the end that was wrapped around the mandrel tightly. And we're going to make a loop here with the round nose pliers. So I'm going to grab at the end of that wire and make my little loop. There we go. Sorry, I'm going out of view there a little bit. It's hard to stay in that little tiny box. There you could see that first loop. Now we're going to bend the other tail end upward, and then we're going to cut off a bit of the excess there. I want about maybe 1.2 centimeters of length, 1 to 1.2 centimeters of length at the end of that wire, and I'm going to create another loop on top of this circle. So again, I'm going to grab the end of that wire flush between the 2 barrels of the round nose pliers and give it a twist. And then rearranging my pliers, I'm going to pull it around and tighten that up. So now you can see we've got like a little figure 8 going there with the 2 loops. That's what we want to create on both sets of earrings. So now we're going to do the same thing on the other earring, grabbing the tail end of the wire that was flush up against the mandrel. I'm going to pull it in a little bit so we could grab it with our round nose pliers, and then make our loop on the inside of the circle like that, adjusting as we need to get that loop right up against the frame, just like that. Now we're going to grab the other tail, the longer tail, and then just push that up, grab my flush cutters and cut off about 1 to 1.2 centimeters And then I'm going to grab the round nose pliers and line that wire up right with the edge of my barrels there, and give that wire another twist. To make that little loop. And here I've realized I've made that upper loop a little bit larger than the lower loop, so we're going to adjust that by snipping off the end of that wire. We're going to flush cut that just a tiny little bit, and then grabbing my round nose pliers, I'm going to go ahead and close that off. And now that's much better. Now I'm seeing that I need to go ahead and adjust this a little bit, so I'm going to grab those round nose pliers and just kind of give each of those loops a twist in the direction they should be going to make that into a nice little figure 8 at the top of the circle. And there you can see I've completed the inner circle for our earrings. Now we're going to grab the 2 pieces of 18 gauge wire that were cut at 15 centimeters in length and make our outer shape for the earrings, which is that teardrop shape. And I'm going to put it right back here at the back part of the mandrel at size 11 on the ring mandrel, and push that wire up against the mandrel nice and snug until it comes to a little point at the top. And as you can see, we've created a nice plump little teardrop shape. And I'm going to pull that apart just a little bit because I want to make sure my circles will fit on the inside of these. So here you can see they fit nice and snug in there. And that is what I'm wanting to start with. And then I'm going to push those top wires so that it's nice and snug. There's no space around the tops of those. So now we're ready to wrap these teardrop shapes into the earring. So I'm going to take this wire on the back side of my teardrop shape and push them so that they're facing upward. So we're bending those to face straight up because that's going to be our little bail. Then the other wire is going to cross over to the back and behind that wire we just bent straight up. We're going to do the same for the other side. I'm trying to make these the same, so I like to do them a little bit at a time on each one to make sure that I'm doing them exactly the same. And with my chain nose pliers, I'm going to just coerce that little bit of wire into place. I'm snugging it up right against that wire that we had pointed straight up for our bail. And I'm pushing that nice and snug around that wire. And I'm wrapping it around just one time, and then I'm going to bend the tail end of that wire down. So here I'm going to show it to you again. We're pressing that wire up against the other side there to go around the bail wire. And we're going to just snug that wire as close as we can to that bail wire. Using my chain nose pliers to snug it up and get a nice wrap around there. And then I'm going to take the tail end of this wire and bend it straight down toward the back. So now you can see we've got a mirror image of this pair of earrings. Now I'm going to grab my flush cutters and cut the tail end of the wire that we wrapped around the bail wire to about 1 centimeter long. I'm going to grab the pair of earrings and line them up together and cut the other tail so that way the loops are going to be the same size. Now with my round nose pliers, I'm going to grab the end of this wire and start to make a loop upward. Like that. And with my chain nose pliers, I'm going to pull that up even tighter. And then we're going to hang our circle onto that little partial loop there. And then with my chain nose pliers, I'm going to pull that up tighter. Now you don't want to do it too tight or your circle's not going to be free hanging. It's going to pull it up in there and kind of jam it in. So you want it to be a little bit loose. And with my flush cutters, I'm going to cut the tail end of this off so that it'll line up nicely up against the wrap we made around that bail wire. So there I'm going to push the tail end up against the frame. And there you can see I've got my loop in there and it hangs nice and free. Now we're going to do the other one. So again, we're going to grab those round nose pliers, bend this wire upward, grab this circle, and make sure it's facing the right direction. You want mirror images, so we want to make sure it's the right direction, and then pop that on there. And not with my round nose pliers, my chain nose pliers, I need to bend this wire up into a loop. Again, making sure we don't trap that up in there and it's not too tight. With my flush cutters, I'm going to nip off the end of this so that it will lay up nicely against the wrap we already created around that bail wire. I'm going to push that right up against there, just like that. And there we have our second earring with the inner circle. So moving right along, we're going to create the bail for these earrings to sit on the ear wire. So as you can see here, I start my wire off to the right, which is the correct direction. For some reason, I decided that I wanted to make the bail this way so that it's perpendicular to my piece, and that is incorrect. My later self will correct this. So having flush cut at about 8 millimeters of length, I'm going to take my round nose pliers and make my loop, bringing the end of that wire back to meet with itself, just like that. And now we've got the bail on one earring, and now we're going to make the bail in the other earring. Now this would have been bent to the left had I done it correctly the first time. And I'm going to flush cut that again at 8 millimeters from that wrap, and then taking my round nose pliers, grab the end of that wire and bring it around to meet back with itself toward the back of the earring. And there you have that loop done, and both of the loops are done on these earrings. Again, those loops should have been flush or the same direction as the other loops, not perpendicular to the piece. Now, having grabbed my bench block and chasing hammer, I'm going to hammer both of these earrings. So not only will that harden these earrings, but it'll also give it a bit of a shine. So here you can see I'm going out away from the piece and hammering the center loop of this piece. So now I'm grabbing the second one and doing the same thing. As you can see, I'm hammering out away from that circle to kind of flare that wire out. And there you can see those are completed with the hammering. So now we need to grab our 24 gauge wire cut at 7 centimeters in length and our beads. So these are the blue Imperial Jasper beads. Now I'm going to thread that 24 gauge wire onto the bead, and then about 1 centimeter we're going to make a bend in that wire. Just like that. I'm going to make this the same size and bend it at the same place. Make a nice little 90-degree bend there. And now with my round nose pliers, I'm going to grab right along the longer part of this wire, and taking that short tail of that 90-degree angle, I'm going to push that around the nose of my round nose pliers to make a loop, just like that. So, and I'm going to keep readjusting my round nose pliers so that I can continue making loops around here. And I'm going to do about 2 loops around until it comes back on itself onto the round nose pliers there. Using my chain nose, I'm going to snug that wire right up against the barrel of the round nose pliers. And as you can see, that gives it a nice clean little spiral. And we're going to pop the bead right onto the end of that wire now and press that spiral up against the bead, just like that, and making sure it's pretty center on there. And this wire is pretty malleable, so it's easy enough to get it centered on the bottom side of that bead. Now taking the other end of the wire, I'm going to bend it over at about a 45-degree angle and grab my round nose pliers and make a loop at the top of this bead. So there you can see that loop. I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and grab a hold of the loop and then wrap the end of this wire 3 times around the base of that loop. And then with my flush cutters, I'm going to flush cut the end of this wire off. And then grab my chain nose pliers and press the end of that wire into the base of that little spiral you just made, or the wraps that you just made around that, the top of that bead. So now we're going to do the same thing with the other wire. With my round nose pliers, I'm going to grab right up along the longer length of wire and then push that smaller tail around the barrel of my round nose pliers until we get 2 complete wraps around the barrel of those wire, the barrel of the round nose pliers, that is. And then with my chain nose pliers, I'm going to burnish that wire right up against my round nose pliers. Just like that, getting it nice and snug. Oh, there's a little bit of a tail left there. I'm going to make sure that's right in there, like that. Now we're going to pop our bead onto the other end of this wire and make sure that coil is lined up with the hole of the bead. And again, we're going to bend this top wire into about a 45-degree angle. Like that. And grab our round nose pliers to make a loop. I'm going to grab that wire, loop it around the barrel of that round nose plier. Grab the chain nose plier, and now we're going to wrap around 3 times. Like that. Grab our flush cutters and nip off the end of this wire. Then we'll grab our flush cutters and tuck that tail right into the base of that coil, like so. And make sure it's completely in there and it's straight, and there you have the second bead done. So now we're going to attach our beads. We're going to grab that chain nose plier and bend this bottom loop of the circle out away from itself, pop the bead on, and then bend it back into place, just like so. And there we have our earring for the left side. Now we're going to get ready to do the second one. So again, we're going to grab that bottom loop, twisting the wire out away from itself. I found it was easier to flip it to the back like that. Pop the bead on and then close that loop back up. And there is the second one, complete. And did you notice that little spring back when I pulled down on that wire? That tells you that that wire is nice and hardened and it's not going to displace very easily. Up next is the ear wires. So we need to grab our 20 gauge wire that's cut at 4.5 centimeters in length. And I'm going to use these bail making or looping pliers. You can use whatever mandrels you have or even just your round nose pliers. I'm going to grab the ends of both of those wires on the 2 millimeter mandrel part of these looping pliers to make this little 2 millimeter loop. And there you can see both wires are side by side there. And then I'm going to put it around or between the 7 and 9 millimeter bail making slots there, and push that wire around the 9 millimeter mandrel there until it meets back up against itself. And there you can see I've got the beginnings of my ear wires. Now placing those back together, I'm going to bend the end of these wires out away from the loop that I created. So at about 2 millimeters from the end. So there, I'm going to bend those out just like that. And there you can see the shape of the ear wires is created. I'm going to grab my bench block and chasing hammer, and I'm going to harden these ear wires only on the side where the loop is. So I'm going to flare that out a bit to give it a little bit of design, hammer the little loop that the earring will attach to. And can you see that? How pretty that is? And I'm only doing this side of the ear wire because I want the top part of that ear wire to stay round. That's the part that sits in your ear, and we want that to be as round as possible for comfort. And then I do harden the rest of the earring with a nylon hammer, which I do not show here. And then with my cup burr, which is like a little cup there, you could see that. That fits over the end of the wire, and then I twist back and forth and round off the end of the ear wire there. So what that does is it deburrs the end of the wire. It just smooths it out so that you don't have any jagged edge on the end of that wire as you're sticking it into that little ear hole. So here you can see the difference. You got a rounded over edge and then a kind of jagged, sharp edge. So we just want to soften that edge up by using this cut burr. You can also just use a file or a fingernail file, whatever you have on hand, even a piece of sandpaper, just to smooth the end of that wire out. So there we've got both of the ear wires complete. So now we're going to get ready to put the earrings onto the ear wires. I start off grabbing my chain nose pliers and bend that loop out to the side. And here is where my future self finally caught up and realized, oh no, this is the wrong direction. So my bail needs to be facing the other way, so that all three of those loops are flat and facing the right direction. So now that we got the loops going the right direction, and I get them adjusted to where I need them, we can now put them on the ear wires. So again, bend that loop to the side, pop the earring on, and bend that loop back. Just like that. And now you can see the ear wire is facing the right direction and not sideways, but facing forward. This earring I had already opened earlier, or the ear wire, and then I place my earring onto that ear wire. And now we have a completed set of earrings. What did you guys think of this project? Did you like it? What kind of bead would you use in your earrings? If you enjoyed watching this video, I sure would appreciate the like and the subscribe if you want to see more like this in the future. And thank you so much for watching. We'll see y'all next week.